Yes, exactly. So I start with a quote, this introduction of our workshop. Robert and Marcus, some 60 years ago, wrote an article about the impact of Aristotle on medieval thought. As it is well known, the Stagirite's oeuvre arrived to Western Europe by the mediation of Latin translations from the Greek and Arabic. Marcus assessed the translated text as follows, I'm quoting. Take any of Thomas Aquinas' commentaries on the metaphysics or the ethics, the De Anima, or the logical works. Open it at random, and what you will find is something like this. First, you will have reproduced the Latin version, which he used. This will normally be the word-by-word translation prepared by Willem of Moerbeke. This is practically incomprehensible unless you go through the labor of turning it back into Greek first. So far, the end of quote. Marcus's comment calls into question the value of medieval translations and makes us researchers consider or reconsider what was the role that Greek to Latin translations played in medieval knowledge transfer. As a novelty, our workshop addresses this question by a conceptual approach to an interdisciplinary source material. Of course, we are not the pioneers who investigate the translation phenomenon as such on a larger scale. Charles Homer Hoskins's monographs and articles he elaborated roughly a century ago still constitute the backbone of scholarship on Greek-Latin translations. Since Hoskins's overview in 1924, Marie-Thérèse d'Alverny examined the status artis in 1982. Furthermore, Walter Berschin contributed to the question in 1988 when the extended English edition of his Griechisch Lateinisches Mittelalter appeared. You can see the German work and the extended edition afterwards. However, since then, research yielded new results. Starting from the critical editions of translations under discussions, only to name but a few, the Aristotelis Latinus project has revealed and still produces new sources on the Latin versions of Aristotle, translated from the Greek that Hoskins and Berschin were not aware of. Our knowledge about the Latin corpus of Galen's works significantly increases too. What is more, mostly Italian colleagues produce new publications regarding theological literature. Michael Engel's recent article on Southern Italian translations demonstrates that proper contextualization produces significant results regarding the triggers behind the translations, their use and influence. Maria Mavrudi called attention to the lack of new and coherent narrative on how translations from the Arabic and Greek influenced European erudition during the Middle Ages. Classical texts were set into circulation, which inspired scholars to reinvent elements of the classical tradition. Compared to earlier research, the novelty of this workshop lies in its conceptual approach to the source material that goes beyond the borders of a single discipline. In the course of the discussions, we will examine the phenomenon of translations from Greek into Latin, considering the period from the 11th until the 13th centuries. The time frame has been chosen for the sake of feasibility, as it is not too broad to prevent speakers to overview developments in disciplines such as philosophy or theology. From a Byzantinist point of view, the workshop covers the Middle Byzantine period, but also enters the 1st century of the Palaiologan era. Our choice of the time frame can be justified by the changing dynamics of the Mediterranean that evidence the expansion of the Latin west towards Sicily, the Levant finally, intrusion to Byzantium itself. Alphanus of Salerno and Constantine the African are often referred to the forerunners of a 12th century translation movement. What is more, It is difficult to assess the role of translations in the 13th century without including William of Moerbecke's towering figure. In addition to historical characteristics that shape the grand narrative of the Mediterranean, our choice of the time frame was also influenced by recent research. The topic has received treatment in collected volumes edited by Denis Serbi and Panagiotis Athanasopoulos. Nevertheless, they focused on text, which is an important feature of literature from Huskinson words, and they discussed translations from Latin into Greek. I also plan today to raise the question of periodization. What do you think, how to deal with such a broad material which covers so many disciplines, and how to choose an appropriate time frame to discuss translations. Going back now to our workshop. By contrast, our workshop, although this turns attention to written evidence too, we made a conscious effort, to focus on different media, manuscripts, graffiti, inscriptions, and also art historical objects. In this respect, our discussions will go beyond the framework of earlier scholarship. But most importantly, the novelty of this meeting lies in our research questions, which are indicated by our title, Transfer of Knowledge, Transfer of Ideas, Transfer of Experiences. Earlier scholarship was trying to understand the translation phenomenon with an approach that assesses different regions, collecting translators and translated texts following a chronological order. By contrast, even a short look at the surviving translated material reveals that during the Middle Ages, a certain selection was at work when picking up what to translate. Compared to the Renaissance, literary texts such as classical plays, epic, and even historiography are conspicuously absent. Instead, scientific, legal, and religious texts were interpreted. Therefore, when trying to understand the impact of translations, we decided to focus on the fields where medieval scholars and literati learned from the translated material. As a result of this idea, our first panel, entitled Transfer of Knowledge, focuses on the most important achievements that translations brought about according to different disciplines. Theology, law, philosophy, medicine, and the sciences are examined, whereas the list is completed by contribution on the use of translations in knowledge hubs, namely in universities. In the volume, we plan to include hagiography too. Transfer of Ideas, the title of the second panel, turns attention to the translators themselves. As we will see, interpreters played a key role in oral and written knowledge transfer. They had to create trust in their patrons and convince them that their translations are reliable. It will be also analyzed in which way prognostication and translated text influence political decision-making. Furthermore, we also see we presented a list of known or identifiable translators, and we will gain an impression about translators in the splinter states after 1204, both in the Latin Kingdom of Constantinople and in the Empire of Nicaea. The third panel, Transfer of Experiences, aims at going beyond the details of disciplines and translated texts. The focus will be directed at translations and storytelling, at religious experience, and at the circulation and use of manuscripts. The session will be closed by two contributions on visual evidence of translations that survive as inscriptions in the Nativity Church in Bethlehem and on the Grandmont Reliquary. So far, thank you for your attention. And now I can give you the word to Vivi as moderator and to Alessandra. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter.